All right, let's talk about something that keeps landlords up at night. We're going to break down one of the most high-stakes parts of the job, how to raise your rents without landing yourself in a lawsuit.
There's this unspoken truth in the world of real estate that nobody really tells you about, but it's true. The very second you sign that deed and get your first tenant,
Boom. You're also a lawyer. Now, hold on, I know exactly what you're thinking. You didn't go to law school, you definitely didn't pass the bar.
and you're right, it's not about having a fancy degree hanging on the wall. It's about something much more immediate and, frankly, a whole lot more perilous. It's about danger. Because let me tell you, the legal system doesn't really care about your good intentions. And the phrase, "I didn't know," is pretty much the fastest ticket you can buy to a courtroom. So here's our game plan for today. We're going to walk through the 5 areas you absolutely have to master. First, the one law you can't afford to ignore. Second, why being consistent is your best defense. Third, how to walk that legal tightrope. Fourth, a practical playbook to keep you compliant. And finally, why your reputation is your most valuable asset. Okay, let's start with the absolute foundation. There is one single piece of legislation that dictates every single landlord-tenant relationship in America. Doesn't matter if you own a skyscraper or a single-family home. And that, my friends, is the Fair Housing Act. This is the big one. This is the federal law that's all about preventing discrimination. And trust me, telling a judge you've never actually read it, that's not going to fly. Now, here's what's so important about this. These 7 categories, this is the federal minimum. This is the baseline. The key thing to remember is that your state or even your city can, and they almost always do, add more protected classes to this list. Things like source of income or age. You have to know your local rules. And this just nails the modern risk perfectly. It's not about avoiding some obvious, terrible comment anymore. In today's world, a quick email, a casual text message, even the way you word a rental ad, all of that can become Exhibit A in a lawsuit. So that leads us perfectly into the #1 reason that well-meaning landlords find themselves in legal trouble. It's rarely about actual malice. It's almost always about something far more subtle. I mean, just look at this list. These feel like everyday situations, don't they? You're trying to be a decent person, so you waive a late fee for a tenant who's struggling. Or you're just making small talk during a showing and ask a seemingly innocent question about kids. But here's the trap. Every single one of these is a potential fair housing violation if you aren't consistent. The minute you make an exception for one person, you've set a precedent that can be used against you by the next. And this is the key takeaway, the one thing you really have to burn into your brain. The law isn't judging your character. It doesn't care if you think you're being a fair person. It is an objective system that cares about one thing and one thing only. Did you apply the exact same rules in the exact same way to every single person? Consistency isn't just a good idea, it is your only real shield. Okay, so now things get a little more complicated, because it's not just one set of rules you have to follow. Being a landlord today is like walking a legal tightrope between federal, state, and local laws, and they all apply to you at the same time. Here's probably the easiest way to think about it. Federal law, like the Fair Housing Act, sets the floor. That's the absolute minimum standard of protection you have to provide. But then your state and city laws come in and build on top of that. They raise the ceiling, adding more restrictive rules like rent control or specific notice periods that you also have to follow perfectly. Now, here is a legal landmine that so many people step on completely by accident: constructive eviction. So, picture this. A tenant's heat goes out in the dead of winter. They call you, they email you, crickets. The apartment is basically unlivable, so they feel forced to move out. Now, you never actually handed them an eviction notice, did you? But in the eyes of the law, you just evicted them through your own neglect. And that is a huge liability. This is the rule to live by, right here. You can't let your property fall apart as a backdoor way to encourage a tenant to leave so you can jack up the rent for the next person. That is a direct line to getting sued. So, when you do decide it's time to raise the rent, you have to do it by the book. No shortcuts. It really all boils down to these 3 non-negotiable steps. You have to give the proper notice period your state requires. You have to deliver it in writing, no text messages. And you have to apply it equally to all similar tenants. You mess up just one of these, and the entire rent increase can get tossed out in court. Okay, enough about the problems. Let's shift gears and talk about the solution. How do you protect yourself?
especially if you're even thinking about selling your property down the line. You need a playbook.
Long before you even think about listing your property, you need to do your own internal audit, a fair housing tune-up, if you will. I'm talking go through every lease, standardize all your rules, train your staff on what they can and can't say, and document everything. I mean, everything. And you know what? Creating a simple compliance binder for a potential buyer, that's not just smart. It builds incredible trust and can seriously increase the value of your asset.
And this is exactly why it's so critical. During the due diligence phase, you better believe a savvy buyer and their lender are going to be digging for these kinds of compliance issues. If they find a bunch of problems you haven't dealt with, that's the fastest way I know to kill a deal and get a bad reputation in the market. Which brings us to our final and maybe most important point. The financial hit from a lawsuit is one thing, but there's another cost that is permanent.
This really says it all. You can fix a spreadsheet. You can survive a few months of empty units. But once a fair housing complaint gets filed against you, it becomes public record. It's out there forever. Banks see it, brokers see it, future buyers see it. It is a permanent scar on your professional reputation. And that is one asset you can never, ever get back. So when you put it all together, it becomes pretty clear that fair housing isn't the enemy. It's just the instruction manual for being a professional, protected landlord. And it all comes down to a really simple choice. Because in this business, there's only one thing scarier than the decision to raise rents. And that's the catastrophic mistake of raising them the wrong way. Know the rules, be consistent, and stay out of court. Thanks for watching.